ahead and start. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Erinn Sweet. I'm the communications specialist with UACC, and I've been actively working behind the scenes with Pauletta and Sherry's daughter, Corinne, with the Story Gathering Project. And Roberta, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Roberta Campbell, and I am an urban Appalachian. And I have been in Northern Kentucky for about 31 years, but I'm originally from Eastern Kentucky. And I've been involved with Urban Appalachian Council, sat on the board for 18 years, and then I've been involved with UACC. And I've just recently taken over, chairing the UACC Research Committee.
Yes. Yes. And you guys are doing amazing work so far. I love seeing everything that you guys have come up with so far. So where did you grow up? And describe a little bit about your experience where you grew up.
Okay, well, I was born in Virginia, but I grew up in Letcher County, at least my early years. And up through high school, I lived in, or even up through college, I lived in Eastern Kentucky. We ended up in Ashland. And then at one point in college, I went to Moorhead. So never really got out of that except for a very brief time for 1 year. But when I was young, I lived right next to my uncle's general store, and he had some mines. I'm not sure how many he had, but he had one right up on the hill behind us. And I used to watch the miners come down, or they just come pouring down off that mountain, and they go into the store and get sandwiches and stuff. And it was very rural. My cousin, I had cousins and aunts and uncles around. My first cousin lived down the road or just a little bit. We could walk. We used to play together all the time, me and her and my sister.
What kind of values were instilled within you back home or from your parents and family and friends?
Well, we were pretty tolerant. I'm trying to remember. I know on my mother's side, they lived in a small town, and there were a lot of African Americans around. And so you heard the N word and things like that. We didn't hear that, but that's mostly because we just weren't around folks like that. But my mother ordered National Geographic for us all the time. So we had some idea about the world. We traveled a little bit. We didn't go very far, but we ran around, did this and that. And I think that somewhere along the line, I got the idea that I was supposed to treat everybody nicely. My mom was an animal champion more than anything else. We always had cats, and we were supposed to be kind to them. We were a Christian home. We were raised in Methodist church. We went to other churches around, but we were raised, I remember being baptized and all of that. I moved, I've grown considerably far from that, but it's still important to me, the experience of being raised like that.
Yes.
We would sit and I'd play thumbs with Dad.
Yeah.
Thumb.
Yeah, my grandpa used to chase me around the house, and then when he caught me, he'd put me over his shoulder and he'd say, "I can make a big biscuit with this sack of flour." Yeah. So very much like my experience, you are an urban Appalachian. So you kind of moved out of the rural area into the city. Talk a little bit about your experience. Did you feel welcome? Did you feel misunderstood at all? Did you feel what was that like for you? I'm interested.
That's a good question, and it has to be tempered with knowing that I had just gotten out of graduate school, And I'd been in graduate school for a long time. It had been very stressful. So when we moved up here, I was real uncomfortable. But it had less to do with moving to the city than it was to being away from.
The support system.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Really, really strong support system. And I mean, I'd just gotten almost to the point where I was scared of my own shadow.
Hmm.
And that wasn't like me. Uh, but it was somewhat influenced by a really bad experience I had when I was 11 and we moved to Gary, Indiana. And I was treated very badly. I was bullied. I didn't know.
Yeah. Um, yeah, when I moved up here for college, I just remember feeling so like isolated. You know, my freshman year, after my first semester, I was like looking into transferring back to Eastern Kentucky University. I was like, I don't know about this, but I didn't. I stuck it out. That was definitely the hardest thing for me because, you know, back home, it's like very communal based and like, I don't know, there's a community and I lost that. And that was hard for me. And I can only empathize with the migrants that first came, um, decades ago, you know, what that must have felt like. I mean, they created their own communities too, which is what UACC, I think, is a lot of. And UAC, I'm sure, was a community for people like us.
Yeah.
Have that.
The thing is, I was 40 when we moved to this area, I was married then. And I had lived in New York and I'd run all over New York City barefoot. I mean, it didn't, sway me at all. I went in the subway. I went in places I wouldn't go now. But somewhere in graduate school, I think just the stress of it kind of threw me backwards.
Yeah.
And things like knowing that I'm going to an Ohio city, uh, remembering things that were said at Moorhead by students from Ohio, things I heard, it's kind of put me in a real um, fearful kind of mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were growing up, did you like see yourself as Appalachian or was it later in life that you started?
It was much later, and it had to do with um, kind of an accumulation of lots of things. And, the experience when I was growing up, or that one year we lived away. But even in New York, I ran into some prejudice. It was more, you're from Kentucky, huh? Aren't they all backwards? And this is from a girl from Ireland. Okay. So it's been that kind of thing. And then when I decided, I don't know, I lived upstate for a little bit. And upstate New York doesn't mean going very far from the city. It means, but it was a little more rural, and it was like home, but it wasn't home, and I didn't know people. I decided I'm going back to graduate school and I'm going to study being an Appalachian. It
Mhm.
just sort of coalesced there, you know.
Mhm.
There are lots of things that kind of led up to it. But by then I decided that's what I am. I'm an Appalachian.
That's where I'm at in my research. I tried to think of every and any other subject to do for my thesis project, and here I am doing Appalachian cultural studies, identity studies, because it's like, you know, at the end of the day, that's what I know, that's who I am, and that's what I
Mhm.
want to learn more about. And um, it's just the older I get, the stronger, because I feel like I have to keep studying it to keep in touch with that part of myself, or else I lose it. Um, but I'm curious to know if within academia, if you ever found yourself like having to prove your intelligence or having to um, feeling like you're working harder than some of your peers in overcoming any of that?
I felt like that a couple of times. And some of that was due to the fact that I am an introvert. And I remember getting really stressed out doing my master's thesis. Uh, and I ran up against some individuals I just wasn't comfortable with.
Mhm.
And they were pushing me really, really hard. And I felt like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the work they wanted me to do. And after a while, began to feel like they saw me as just not very bright.
Mhm.
Not stupid, but just not, I just couldn't cut it. I wasn't there. And then at another point, I was at, I was tenure track faculty line. I had been in the tenure track faculty line at what's called University College at UC. And I think I would have done all right there. I was real happy there. I loved the students. I loved my department, everything. And they closed it down. The provosts and others closed down University College. And I went out to Raymond Walters. And I never felt like I was taken seriously. Or if I was expecting to jump over a bar that I didn't understand.
Mhm.
I don't know how much of it had to do with me being Appalachian.
Mhm.
I don't know how much it had to do with me being a woman. And these were all women.
Mhm.
But, having to, because they held themselves to a higher bar, they had to prove themselves. And maybe how much of it had to do with my politics,
Mhm.
because I'm very far to the left.
Mhm.
And this department was not.
Mhm.
But I never quite felt like, I felt like they were looking for me to fail,
Yeah.
or noticing every little mistake.
Yeah. My first job in Cincinnati, I got that a lot. I felt like I would say some things and I would just get laughed at. Like
Mm.
I'm reading Bell Hooks right now, and she talks about how, your identity certain things only come out when you're um like in a state of stress or in a state of like comfort. And I noticed that I let my Appalachian show a little bit more when I'm in stressful situations, trying to lighten the mood or trying to make things a little bit easier for people. And then, you crack a joke and someone just laughs at you because, or your accent shows, or you say something this way and just get laughed at. And like no one took, I felt like no one took that side of me seriously. And then on the other side, when I get comfortable, or when I get when I say certain things and it's the first time someone's heard me like speak in my accent, they're like, oh, like, wow, she's comfortable around us. I don't know. I just think about that a lot. And I try to conceal it when I first meet people, as like a safety barrier. But the more comfortable I get, I feel
Yeah.
like the more it shows.
But when I lived in New York, I lived in Queens and worked in the city for about 2.5 years. Most people thought it was cute. They thought the way I
Mhm.
talked was really cute.
Mhm.
And they just associated it as Southern more
Mhm.
than being Appalachian.
I like
They
to
really
tell
understand
people,
it beyond that. It's, oh, just a Southern girl. And my husband at the time, he sounded like he was from Kentucky, but he sounded like he had a Texas drawl. So, I mean, they just thought we were interesting.
yeah, I always get, where are you from? Where are you from? My best friend and I went to college at NKU together, and
Yeah.
we would always get, where are you from? Where are you guys from? I remember one time, so we were talking about Appalachian Wireless, like the phone company, and
Mhm.
someone had never heard of the word Appalachia. And she was trying this is my friend's experience. She was trying to repeat it, and she said, Appalachian? Appalachian. I think it's so funny. People say, is it Appalachian or Appalachian? And I'm like, and I have to go into that whole
Yeah.
dynamic. And it's like, it's just, I don't know. It is funny. Um, and I like to tell people the distinction between Appalachian and Southern accent. Appalachians will say yins, yuns, or yawns.
Mhm. Yeah.
And Southern people will say y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how
Yes.
you know you're dealing with an Appalachian. If you get yins or yuns or any of that sort,
Mhm.
you're dealing with the mountain people. But well, it's been about 15-ish minutes, so I'm gonna stop the interview here. I really appreciate you hopping on and taking some time to talk to me. Let me go ahead. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Uh, Not really. I'll do you one of these days.
Okay,
And now you've given me some things to think about and figure out what questions to ask you.
perfect.
Uh,
All right.